I want to talk today about the Aldol reaction. And in order to understand the Aldol reaction, we really want to look at two other reactions that we've already talked about. We've talked about the Grignard reaction, where the carbonyl carbon of the carbonyl is attacked by a nucleophile. So the nucleophile comes in, the oxygen pulls the electrons up to itself, and we get this tetrahedral intermediate. We've also talked about alkylation of an enolate, where we use a base to remove an alpha hydrogen from the alpha carbon. We generate the enolate, and the enolate acts as a nucleophile on something that has a leaving group on it. The Aldol reaction is kind of a combination of these two reactions. We have a carbonyl that gets attacked by a nucleophile like we do in the Grignard, but the nucleophile that does the attacking is the nucleophile we generated when we generated an enolate with a base removing the alpha hydrogen. So we remove the alpha hydrogen, we generate our nucleophile, it attacks our carbonyl. And what I've tried to do here, and I'm going to use this color scheme in future slides as well, is that I've color-coded things. So this nucleophile, the enolate, is in purple. This is where it ends up in my product. This thing that gets attacked, like it was the Grignard reaction component, is in blue and ends up over here. And my new bond is in green. So let's look at some examples of the Grignard of the Aldol reaction. And this is sort of the simplest form of the Aldol reaction, where you have some aldehyde reacting with itself with a base like sodium hydroxide. This is actually the original version that was discovered long ago as well. And when we mix this aldehyde with this base, what we can get is our aldol product. And you can see where the name comes from. The aldehyde is the Al part of the aldol, and the ol is the alcohol component. So aldol. What happens though is a lot of times when you're running the aldol reaction, the reaction will not stop at this point. You'll actually get a dehydration subsequent to the formation of the new carbon-carbon bond. So the OH and hydrogen leaves. This is a dehydration product. You can see the double bond is conjugated with the carbonyl. And this is actually called an alpha-beta unsaturated carbonyl. The reason is this is the alpha carbon, this is the beta carbon, and the double bond is between the alpha and the beta carbon. So let's look at how this reaction happens. The first step is for our base to remove one of the alpha hydrogens, generating the enolate. And you want to remember that our enolate has two resonance structures, and since they're resonance structures, we want to make sure we indicate it appropriately by putting the brackets around them like this. We're going to focus on this particular resonance structure because it's easier to see where the reaction goes from this first resonance structure. So this is our nucleophile, and it's going to attack another one of our aldehydes. So this is another molecule of our reactant, and you can see the nucleophile that we've generated in the enolate reaction is coming over here and attacking the carbonyl carbon. Now I'm going to do something. I'm going to color code these two molecules that are involved in the reaction so we can keep track of them going forward. So I've made this one this purplish pink color and this one blue. So as I said, the nucleophile attacks the carbonyl, and the product that we get looks like this. So the aldehyde that generated the enolate is right here. You can see it still has the C double bond O, and the aldehyde that got attacked by the enolate is no longer having a C double bond O. It has this O minus and is in blue, and the new bond made between the two is right here. Now, at the end of this reaction, this oxygen is protonated probably by a molecule of water, giving us our aldol product. Now you remember I said that this dehydrates at the end of the reaction, so let's look at that. So this hydrogen moves in, the OH leaves, and we get our dehydration product. Now there's something that should really bother you about the reaction that I just showed right now, because the leaving group that I've shown right here is an OH minus. And everything you know, everything we've talked about in organic chemistry should tell you OH minus is a horrible leaving group. It's a strong base. Strong bases are bad leaving groups. And you should say, why am I drawing OH minus as a leaving group? Well, it turns out, and your textbook talks about this a little bit, this reaction is a little bit different than other elimination reactions you've talked about. We've talked about E1 reactions, and we've talked about E2 reactions for eliminations. This is actually called an E1CB elimination reaction. Now, I don't want to talk about the details of this. Your textbook goes into it a little bit, but it's not really relevant for the conversation we're having today. The important thing for us to remember is that in the E1CB elimination type, OH minus can be our leaving group. I want to spend just a few minutes talking about how we predict the products of an aldol reaction, because that can be tricky sometimes. So I'm going to use this as my example. We're treating it again with aqueous NaOH. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write another copy of this molecule on my product side. Then once I do that, I'm going to put a second copy of the molecule over there, because we know that two molecules of our aldehyde react together. I want you to notice what I did here though. I lined up the carbonyl compound carbon of my second molecule with the alpha carbon of my first molecule, because that's where the new bond is going to be made, between this alpha carbon and that carbonyl. So let me draw that bond in right now. And we know, of course, that that's no longer a double bond, because we can't have 5 bonds to carbon, and that's not an O minus at this point. It's a OH at this point, it's an O minus, so let's put that in. So that is the product that we would get when we form our new bond, and it is an OH minus after we protonate it. So that's how I kind of try to use some sort of system to predict my products. And of course, if you wanted to draw the dehydration product, let me just do that. We put a double bond there. So erase the hydroxide and draw in our double bond. Now we have our dehydration product. Of course, that's not drawn quite well. So if we want to draw it properly, we would do this. Oops. Move that hydrogen up like that. And let's try to do the same thing to the rest of this molecule as well, so it looks a little bit more reasonable. So I'll move that up like this, and maybe over a little bit like this. And it's a little bit off, but you get the idea. So this would be our dehydration product.